I'll be presenting with Kristi Verma, who is part of the solution assessment team at Microsoft, and we'll be presenting DPi30 and its modern data platform in 30 days. And before we get going, I'm just going to turn it over to Matt Gianquinto, and he is going to tell you a little bit about our sponsor, 1GPA, who is sponsoring our webinar today. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Matt Gianquinto. I'm Tallan's Business Development Manager for State and Local Government Practice. And just before we get started with the webinar, I wanted to acknowledge and thank our partners at One Government Procurement Alliance for supporting today's webinar. We're very proud to have recently been selected as a business intelligence and data analytics solutions provider to support 1GPA members, some of which I believe may be in attendance today. 1GPA is a national nonprofit governmental purchasing cooperative that allows public entities to take advantage of existing contracts to purchase goods and services they need from local and national vendors, of which Tallan is one. All 1GPA contracts are approved and awarded by 1GPA's lead governmental entities and are available for the use and benefit of all entities complying with their own state procurement laws and regulations. Eligible members do include school districts, charter schools, universities, colleges, cities, towns, municipalities, counties, states, local governments, federal government, Native American communities, fire districts, and truly any other political subdivision. It is very easy for your agency to become a member, and to do that, you can contact us following the webinar or visit their website, 1gpa.org, for more information. Thanks, Dan.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So to get us going today, we're going to start out with our agenda and with the welcome and introductions. As I said, we'll go through a DPi30, and a lot of questions we get is, what is this and why do I even care about it? So we're going to go through kind of what is the DPi30, why should you care about it, who is Tallan? That's us. We're the people that partner with Microsoft to deliver these data platform and 30-day engagements. And then we're going to go through the basics of what the engagement is and go through some state and local government client success stories that we have, and then end it with some closing Q&A. And for these DPi30 engagements, they are done for commercial clients as well as state and local government. But this webinar today is to focus more on our state and local government stories. So as I said, my name is Dan Fluitt, Vice President of Sales here at Tallan, and Kristi Verma, who is on the Solutions Assessment team. Kristi is the one that, and actually Bart Schorsch is here today, and those are the two people from the Microsoft side that we at Tallan partner with, and you guys will be partnering with to get one of these DPi30 engagements rolling for your organization. So with that, Kristi, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk about Microsoft's perspective on what the DPi30 engagement is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you all. As Dan mentioned, I'm a solution assessment specialist here on the Microsoft Cloud Economics team. I support state and local government accounts, as well as education and tech for social impact, which is all of our charities and philanthropies. So we're definitely well-versed, or my team is well-versed in understanding contractual requirements, limitations, all of the approvals that are needed to engage in, any type of free for service type of engagements. And I'm here to kind of help walk through the process and share with you kind of what the data platform in 30 days engagement is, and kind of how we engage and how we move through the process. So the data platform in 30 days engagement, it is a 30 to 45 day engagement. And really what we're looking to accomplish is to provide to our customers a hands-on consulting type engagement where we're providing architecture and design recommendations for your data estate in Azure, utilizing data services within the Azure platform. What is it? How do we determine kind of how we move forward? Is this migrating my entire data warehouse? What are we talking about here? So really, this particular engagement is meant to give you a really good hands-on experience of the capabilities of the portfolio and the platform. And it's really based around identifying key business scenarios, such as reporting, such as some type of data and analytics type ingestion workflow. What we're looking at doing is identifying some key business scenarios and then proving out that architecture start to finish in Azure and delivering you a proof of concept, a fully functioning pilot in your own tenant at the end of the engagement. So really what we're doing is showcasing the platform and what's available to you to be able to utilize for your organization and for your specific use case. How do we go about determining what fits in within a data platform in 30 days engagement? Well, that's really an iterative process between the partner. We use a gold certified partner. In this case, we're on the call this morning with Tallan. They're one of our top partners in the government and education sector who are very deep in things around government, utilities, really everything that you're dealing with, health and human services, all of the data that you're looking at, providing some insights or reporting functionality too. So we go really deep in workshops, understanding where that data resides today, who has access to it, how it needs to function, and really what are your short-term and long-term plans for your organization. And then once we've collected all of this information from you, we'll be able to begin deploying the landing zone, building out the architecture, and then providing you with the cost assessment of what this is going to look like built out in Azure. Now, it's important to note this is a free, no-cost engagement. It is an investment that Microsoft has made in our customers to kind of show the value of the platform. There is one little caveat to that, and that is because this is a fully functioning pilot in your own Azure tenant, there are two requirements to partake in this particular engagement. The first is you must have an Azure tenant already established or establish one. It's a very simple process to get that up and running, and your solution specialist, such as Bart, can help, and your account team can help aligning, getting that set up. The second is that any Azure charges that are accrued during this engagement are the responsibility of the customer because it is being built in your tenant. However, before we ever turn anything on, you will have an accurate and very detailed accounting of exactly what those charges are going to be. And then you make the determination from that point whether you would like to proceed or not. Most customers proceed because they want to see all of their hard work in real time and really understand and validate that the pilot is a success. So that's kind of how we move through the engagement from start to finish, what it entails. It entails all of the planning, all of the architecture diagrams, actually building out of the landing zone and building out that particular solution, architecting that solution in Azure, as well as handover and training. And we'll also identify next steps as well. If there's additional workloads you'd like to bring in, you'd like to ingest in the future, what does that planning effort look like? We're happy to walk through the process with you as well on that. So that's kind of an overview of really what the data platform in 30 days engagement is, leaving you with a fully functioning pilot at the end. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions. All right. Well, with that, Dan, I think I will pass it back off to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So now that we've had Microsoft's perspective on what the DPi30 engagement is, we're going to start to get into a little bit about how Tallan delivers these DPi30 engagements. And one question that we get asked all the time is, it's 30 days. Is it really 30 days? What happens if we don't finish in 30 days? What we see is most of these, it is called DPi30, but they take anywhere from 30 to 45 days to kind of get going and get through the whole transition. And we start out with it, and it goes all the time in 3 phases. First phase is analysis and design. And this is a lot, before we get going, we will usually pick the use cases that we're going to accomplish. We fill out a level of effort, and then we get going. And then we'll do a little bit of analysis and design on those use cases. And we'll say, all right, here's the data that we're going to pull in. Here's what we're going to pull it into. Here's what the architecture is going to look like. Here's some of those cost estimates that Kristi was talking about. This is what it's going to look like when we start to go into phase 2. Everybody agrees on it. Microsoft says, yep, that looks good. They give us their blessing. Tallan says it looks good. And, the customers are like, it looks great. Let's keep on going. So from there, we will start to deploy out the solution and put out all of the different pieces that will build up your modern data estate, and then start to ingest the data from the use cases that you're talking through. And when we talk about deploying the solution, it's all the way from ingestion to a report, usually a Power BI report in the back end. Is we will take in raw data files, run it through its process. Sometimes we do like curated data sets or different, depending on the use cases, we'll massage the data. And then at the end of deploying the solution, you'll have the data shown in some sort of Power BI report or some way that's shown in a nice format. And then from there, phase 3 is all about our transition to the customers. And when we do these DPi30 engagements, we have a couple of different ways that they work out. There's some of them that we go through and we do the analysis design, we deploy the solution, we transition it to you, and you go, that looks great. We've got from here. Like, we understand all this. We're going to keep going all by ourselves. The next typical customer that we work with is we do it, deploy it, transition, and then they say, we have these next 5 use cases that we want to do. We know how to do 1 and 2. Can you help us with 3, 4, and 5? And we work in conjunction, side by side with your team to keep on going and do these things. And then there's another customer that we have that says, hey, those 5 use cases that we have lined up, that looks great. Can you do those next 5 for us? So at the end of the DPi30 engagement, we can work with you in any sort of those fashions. And then there's one other type of customer that we have that they already know that they want to have, they've like, we've been thinking about this a lot, and we have 8 use cases that we want to do. So in those types of situations, we will use the funding that Microsoft has for the first use case and then keep on going with the rest of the work. So there's a lot of different options that we can have here, depending on how far along you are in your journey. So when we start to talk about the analysis and design, we're going to do a project kickoff, talk about all the logistics, who needs to be involved. Usually it's people from the IT side, from the report writer side, from the business side that know about the data. We get all of those logistics down so that when we hit the ground, we can hit the ground running. And we will go through reference architectures in the targeted Azure data services. In a few slides here, I'll get into some reference architectures. There's some customers that, they say, all right, that looks good. We're going to go right with that. And then there's some customers that have nuances that like, hey, we can't do that because of this. And we adjust that reference architecture. But we always start off of that reference architecture. And we have a lot of these kind of whiteboarding sessions and say, here's what this is. And here's how other people are using it. And then here's how we're going to use it for you. So it's as much about education in the analysis and design as it is about deploying the solution. Because at the end of the day, we want everybody comfortable that they know what they're getting into and they can support it or semi-support it on their own and understand that as we build on here, we have a solid foundation. So we're going to talk about one of the DPi30 engagements that we did for the state of Washington Employment Security Department. They had about 30 plus years of data, and they had some processes to ingest all of this data and run some reports on it and do a bunch of different things. And it was a daily process that in the beginning, when they first had it, about 15 years ago, it took about 6 or 7 hours to run. Here we were with 30 years of data, and their 24-hour process soon turned into a 24-hour to 30-hour process and was no longer a daily process. So what we did is we were able to ingest, they had, I think it was like an 18-step process of how they got this data in until a report came out. So what we were able to do is ingest the data and use some of the modern data platform components. And we were able to, there was one process that we were able to cut down from 11 hours to taking it down to 90 minutes to restore this data. And this was something that it was no magic. It was just pretty much taking advantage of the scalability of the cloud. It was something that if they had done this on-prem, they would have had to have monster machines just sitting there doing nothing except for this 90 minutes a day to process this data. And for the cost that it would cost to have it, it really wasn't worth it. When they went to the cloud, they were able to take advantage of the scalability and use that machine or use that process for 90 minutes and only pay for it for 90 minutes. So this was a use case that was something that had been working for years, and it just was taking too long. And we were able to show through the DPi30 engagement that, hey, we can speed up this process. And now let's start to take in more and more data sources. So as I was talking about before, this is what we were usually talking about for a modern data estate architecture. And when we were talking about phase 1, 2, and 3, this is kind of almost a phase 4. This is the full-on soup to nuts modern data estate architecture. When we taking in different line of business sources, logs, streams, media, files, all kinds of different stuff. A lot of times it'll go into Azure Data Factory. Sometimes we use Databricks, sometimes we use Synapse, sometimes we use both. A lot of it will go and sit in data lake storage. We've done different things with Azure data sharing. And then from there, it can either come out of the data lake, come out of Synapse, and go to either Power BI reporting, other business services. We've done engagements where we took a lot of data, processed it, curated it, and then made and kind of cleaned it up and then made that data available via APIs for like constituents or customers. So there's a lot of different pieces that can go into the modern data estate architecture. And as I said before, like this is almost a phase 4 because this is using everything. When we talk about the sample DPi30 architecture, we try and, I don't want to say dumb it down, but simplify it. And that we take 1 to 3 data sources, pump it through Azure Data Factory, usually use Synapse, sometimes use Databricks, almost always are using the Azure Data Lake storage, and it comes out of the Power BI report. And as we go through and do these things and everybody gets more comfortable, we kind of iterate on it and then add in more pieces. And our goal at the end of this sample architecture is to have an operational report that people can actually look at, touch, feel, do some filtering on it. And the good thing about it is it's real data. It's not just something that is mocked up data or, you know, I don't want to say garbage data, but it's something that's real. And people can look at it and then say, yes, you know, this does work for us, or no, let's change it around and have it work this way. So it, as we said before, it's a fully operational report, and you see things go in from a raw data file all the way through to the Power BI report, and everything is out there ready for you to look at and ready to go. When we talk about the sample data flows, a lot of people say, well, you know, what kind of happens here? And a lot of times we will take a data source of either an on-premises database or maybe a raw file that's sitting somewhere. And we'll, for some of these engagements, we get connectivity from Azure back to your on-premises data center or co-location, and then, you know, ingest the data in through Data Factory or Databricks. From there, we usually store it in the Azure Data Lake storage. We'll talk about different containers of kind of how the data is sitting and whether or not it is it's like just raw data, it's curated data, it's archived data. We can set all of these things up for you so that we can have a real data flow at the end of the day. From there, it's usually going through a lot of preparation and massaging. A lot of that is done with Synapse, Databricks. And then from there, it can be put out for consumption. As we were talking about before, we have Power BI reports. There's sometimes that we've made this data available for the data scientists. They can start to do some machine learning, some real hardcore data science stuff on here. There's different, as we were saying before, there's different APIs that we've done that have gone out to different applications. Sometimes they'll go out to Excel spreadsheets. But from there, all of that stuff is ready for you to use, and it's consumable by whoever we give access to it. So when we talk about the step 2, after we've done the analysis and design, and we kind of talk through all the things that we just talked through with the data flow, the pieces that we're going to use, we will go through and actually deploy the solution. And we'll first thing is we always want to review the platform and architecture, make sure that everybody's okay with it. And these are all done with working sessions with the team, with the the data and analytics team, or whatever our customers tend to call their teams. But it's gone through, and each piece that's deployed, we'll go through, walk through, and we kind of take an approach of, here's what it is, here's how it works, and here's how it's working for you. And from there, it's very hands-on with both us and the customer, very open Q&A session. So anything that's coming in here when we're deploying the solution, we're already starting that transition to you guys, to the customer, and say like, hey, here's what it is. And a lot of times people will always say, you've done this for a bunch of different health departments, or you've done it for a bunch of water utilities. What else are they doing? How are they using these things? And we're able to give a lot of perspectives of how other people are doing it without giving away their secret sauce of, if there's something that is, very near and dear to somebody's heart, we're not going to give away their logic of how they're doing it, but we can say, hey, this is the way other people are using all of these Azure products, and this is how they're providing business value out of them. And as I said before, this will be all the way from deploying everything in Azure, deploying out the Power BI reports. And as part of some of these engagements, Microsoft will also allow us to do what we call a Ready Govern workshop, where we can go through and say, here is all of the stuff in Azure beyond the data things. When we talk about Azure security, monitoring, cost management, all of the stuff that lets you govern your Azure environment so it's not like the wild, wild west. When we go through and deploy all of that stuff, we're going to make sure that all of the security boxes are checked, that if things need to be monitored, they can be monitored. The biggest piece that everybody always asks is, how can I see how much this thing costs? We'll go through all the cost management features in Azure. So our approach to the DPi30 engagements follows along, if anybody's familiar with Microsoft's cloud adoption framework, is we will always start out with a vision and a roadmap. And because I always say that, if you start to run a marathon and you have no idea where the finish line is, you're just going to keep running and running and running. So we want to have a roadmap that has a vision and a pure roadmap and a finish line in there. And then we'll start out with a proof of concept that builds a solid foundation. Because as I said before, when we are done with this DPi30 engagement, we want to make sure that you have a solid foundation that you're ready to build on top of. And I can't tell you how many times we've gone into customers and they say, yeah, we have something running in Azure. We're not quite sure if it's right or wrong. We kind of don't know what's going on out there. That's the one thing that we don't want to have you say at the end of our engagement. So we want to make sure you have that final solid foundation out there. You understand what's being built. And then we're going to start out with a minimum viable product, which is this simple use case that we're putting together. So from there, after we have that minimum viable product in that first use case, we can iterate on it and start to take in more use cases. Or if the use case that we didn't quite work out the way that we thought it was going to, we can make that right before we move on to the next piece. And then the last part of our engagements that we really pride ourselves on is the governance and enablement and operationalizing the environment. And the operationalization piece is not part of the DPi30, and that's usually the follow-on of the next use case. But this is going through making sure that everything that you were able to do on-prem, you can do in the cloud. And when we talk about that, is making sure, like if you have a network operations center and a security operations center, making sure that all of the logs from all of the new stuff is going into the things that need to be ingested in, and really making sure that it's operationalized and that you're comfortable having this as a production environment. So the next use case that we want to talk about is, I think there's some people from DC Water on here. We did a project for DC Water, and one of the things that was an issue with DC Water is and it's an issue with water utilities all over the place, and one just happened here in the town next to us in Connecticut, that a water main breaks, and they never seem to break at an opportune time. The one that happened here in Connecticut, it broke on a Saturday afternoon on Main Street at 5 o'clock. And as you can imagine, if you start to see water bubbling up out of the street, it's not a good thing. So what DC Water was telling, when we got engaged with this, they said there's a lot of indicators that we can see with pressure in pipes and different flow rates and all kinds of things. And they've been doing this for so long. They say, we know when like this starts to happen that we need to get in there and either fix these pipes right now or start to inspect them, because we know there's going to be a failure. And so what they wanted to do was predictive maintenance on water mains. And it's, as you can imagine, it's much easier than they said this to me, and I never thought about it until they actually said it. They go, it's much easier to plan and close down a street and arrange to have some police officers dig up the street, look at the thing, and, close the street back up, come back the next day and do it all again, rather than seeing water bubble up out of the street. And then you have a big hole in the street. You're kind of running around like a chicken with your head cut off until it gets fixed. And if they can do predictive maintenance, then they can schedule these things, schedule road closures, do what they need to do so that it's not an all-out emergency. So what the pieces that we put together with them was monitoring on a lot of their water mains so that they could start to see trends and then say, hey, we need to get in there and look at these pipes, or we need to do something before we have the water bubbling up out of the street. So the last part of our DPi30 engagement is the transition to the customer. And as we were talking about, this is something that starts right from the beginning. It's nothing like that at the last day you get a whole bunch of documents and you get, hey, here's your environment, good luck. It's a thing that we're doing a transition to the technical team, as well as the business team, as well as the business sponsors. So we're collecting and sharing all the project deliverables that we had. That would be the architecture documents, the reports that we've had. We run through the last run through of your Azure environment, and we will do a presentation with Microsoft, our customers, the business sponsors, and Tallan, and go through the executive presentation and demonstration of, hey, this is what it is, this is what we build out, and do you really want to keep going? And usually throughout the first two phases of these engagements, we always hear inklings of, oh, it would be really neat if we could do this one next, or we could do this use case next, or if we could do that next. So in this transition, we start to talk about, hey, was this really successful for you? Did it add value? And what can we talk about doing next? And then from there, that ends the DPi30 engagement. And as I said before, we can go through and work with you side by side. We could do more use cases on our own. That's totally up to you. One of the things that Kristi mentioned, and we've put our own slide in here, because at the end of this presentation, everybody always wants to know, hey, how much is this really going to cost us? And so one of the things that we go through is we'll go through and spell out each line item of the things that are deployed in Azure, how much each of them costs. And, you know, if we were going to go forward, obviously, as you start to build out more and more things in Azure, we can go through and give you a cost estimate of what would it take to bring this to the next level and to the next level and to the next level. So one of the main deliverables that people are always looking for is how much is this going to cost? So that is definitely one of the things that are in here. And the last use case that I wanted to talk about is another water utility that we did in Austin, Texas. And they had a lot of people, and I never ever heard of this until we talked to them, that were stealing water. And I never even thought of stealing water, but they had customers that didn't have meters that were up to date, or people were tapping into other people, like businesses were tapping into other businesses and stealing their water. So what we did for them was a lot like what we did for DC Water, in that we were looking for trends and analysis of meter reads to find anomalies, to find people that were stealing water, or people that, you know, weren't quite being the honest citizens that they should be. So although this use case is different in terms of, you know, one was looking for predictive maintenance, this one was looking for anomalies in reads, the premise of it is a lot the same. Is we're taking in data, putting it through its paces, and then having meaningful reports come out at the end. So we've done, as we've said, we've done a lot of these DPi30 engagements for government utilities, for water utilities, for a lot of health department on like COVID type of engagements, HIV surveillance. We've done a whole bunch of things. And as I said before, it's a lot of the sample architecture seems to be the same no matter which medium we're using, whether it's water utilities, whether it's state and local government, education. It's a lot of taking in data, putting it through its paces, cleaning it up, and providing meaningful reports at the end. So with that, I will wrap us up here. We have about six or so minutes. If anybody has any questions for myself or Kristi at Microsoft or Bart, please take yourself off mute. And I know, Bart, you always like to say a few words. So if you would like to jump in here before the Q&A, feel free.
Oh, Dan, you know better than to give me a microphone. What I love about a DPi30 is it answers the question, how do you eat the elephant? I mean, there's so many potential things that you can be doing in Azure, that where to start in a way that adds value is usually the question. And this is the answer. How do you start using Azure? How do you get a foothold in that makes sense, that drives value, that helps you understand the potential and can lead to those next steps and those next things that you're looking for. So if you're looking for a way to get started in Azure in a meaningful way that adds value, that helps you progress your organization's goals, it's not a cookie cutter, it's something very unique to you. This is a great program to get started. So thanks, Dan.
And Bart, you kind of hit the nail right on the head here. Is one of the things that I always say when we jump on these initial calls is, you know, if you're doing this just because you're doing it and because it's free, like that, I want to see the value that it's going to bring to the business or to the constituents or to whomever. Is they are something that's pretty quick, that within 45 days, you have something that shows value, and it's very meaningful. So do we have any questions? All right, if there's no questions from here, the Tallan team should be following up with everybody here that's on the call. So I would appreciate it if when everybody follows up that if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, reach out to the Tallan team, or feel free to reach out to Bart or Kristi on the Microsoft side. And we're excited to get these DPi30 engagements going because, as I said, a lot of them have turned into a real quick proof of concept, and then, you know, growing and growing and adding more business value at the end. So I would like to thank everybody for their time today and have a wonderful afternoon.